Hello, Gary Brooker there in Malmö, Sweden.
Here we are, Malmö, which is in southern Sweden, near Copenhagen.
Gary, let's start at you were born in Hackney, East London.
I was born in Hackney. Perhaps a lot of places have got bombed in the war. But I was also born by cesarean, so maybe that was the nearest place to Enfield where we actually lived, where Mum and Dad lived. So I ended up being a real Cockney, born within the sound of Bow Bells.
When did you move out to Southend?
I think when I was 9. My father played Hawaiian guitar, and he was with a band called Felix Mendelssohn's Hawaiian Serenaders, but Felix died and the band fell apart. Meanwhile, my father was running the orchestra or the band at the Palace Hotel in Southend-on-Sea. They didn't ask me if I wanted to move there. I might have when I was 9. I just got moved with everybody else. But it was a good place to grow up.
Did he have designs on you following in his footsteps?
Unfortunately, my father died suddenly when I was 11, and I don't think we ever discussed it. But I used to play piano. I had piano lessons, and I'd played with him on stage at certain times of the year, Christmas time and that. We did duets. 9 or 10 was a bit early to think about what you're going to be. I thought I was going to be a spaceman, an astronaut, or a cricketer.
Can you come and play for the Australians, please? Because we're not doing too well.
Might do well. Might end up captain.
But look, we're going through a transition.
Oh.
It's a transition process, Gary.
Yes, I thought, is that what you call it?
Gary, would you say that seeing your father being a musician that sort of persuaded you to joining him in a show, like you said, or to pick up an instrument, because you said you started quite young?
I grew up with that kind of thing going on. I used to go and see the Hawaiian Serenaders playing, but of course I grew up with Hawaiian music, which was rather odd.
Did you pick up a ukulele?
Oh yeah, I picked up ukulele, and then when skiffle started in England when I was 12 or something, I played the banjo and the guitar in those skiffle bands. One day somebody at school found out that I played the piano. They asked me to join the band and play the piano. I thought I was a banjo or a guitarist. So I ended up playing the piano in what was then an early rock band. They couldn't work out the chords, and I could, so I had a real job telling everybody when it was a B or an A or anything else.
Could you read music as well?
Well, I mean, when you learn piano with a teacher, you're learning to read music. But I never really took to reading music. I liked playing. In the end, I found a teacher. It was after my dad had passed away. He realised in the first couple of months that I did not enjoy reading. Didn't go away and learn it and come back and be able to play it next week. And in the end, he said, "You're not really enjoying this, are you, son?" I said, "Well, no, I'd like to play a bit of Boogie Woogie or a Ray Charles song or something." And so he very kindly wrote those out for me so that I started playing something that I really enjoyed. Good way of teaching.
Gary, the first band I've got, Johnny Short and the Coasters. This wasn't this band, was it?
No, this band I was just talking about at school was called the Electrics, and then I joined up with Johnny Short. He was a marvellous guitarist. He had a friend that played rhythm guitar, and I played the piano. We didn't have a drums or bass, but we used to do a lot of gigs in sort of yacht clubs and places. It was all learning, really.
Was this professional?
Oh, no, I was only 14 or something. Play Friday night, Saturday nights, that sort of thing.
Was there any thoughts of being a professional?
This was all still going on while we were at school. In fact, with Johnny Short and the Coasters, we took part in a band contest where all the Southend-on-Sea bands, and a lot of music going on, a lot of venues to play at. We all took part in this contest, and I think the Coasters came either first or second. The public voted. But on that, there was Robin Trower and Chris Copping, and they had a band called the Raiders, and there was another group called the Outlaws, but somehow the drummer from the Outlaws, Robin Trower on guitar and Chris Copping on bass, and they poached me from the Coasters. They said, "Oh, can you play with us next Saturday?" I said, "Yeah, of course." So I did, and then they asked me if I could play with them the next Saturday, and I did, but I said, "I'd better check with Johnny Short, make sure, we haven't got something on." They said, "It's all right, we've spoken to him, then you're free." I said, all right. Actually, next time I tried to contact Johnny Short, he wouldn't talk to me, because Robin Trower had not asked Johnny Short if I was free. We got named by the man that ran the dance hall where the contest was. We got named the Paramounts.
The Paramounts, you did quite well, because I see that you got signed to Parlophone.
I missed out that when the Paramounts was formed by the owner of the dance hall, with Robin Trower and that, we also had a vocalist called Bob Scott, who was from the Klansmen. So we were 4 bass, drums, guitar and piano, and Bob Scott, frontman vocalist. We just used to do rock covers and things. He liked doing Rick Nelson. But one weekend he didn't turn up, and we were at the gig. Bob Scott never showed. So they said, "Well, do you know any of the words, Gary?" I said, "If I don't, I could make them up." Drummer sang a few, and I ended up singing most of them. And the following week, I was the singer and pianist, not just the pianist. We did well locally, always playing. But until we made a demo and it got to Parlophone and they said, we'll sign you up.
Had the Beatles signed to Parlophone already?
They already had. We signed in December 1963, and I think the Beatles signed up earlier that year. Remember, the Parlophone boss said, look, I got the Beatles in my right hand, I got the Hollies in my left hand, and I want the Paramounts in the middle.
Sounded encouraging to you?
Well, yeah, we didn't quite have the hits that the Beatles and the Hollies had, mind you, but we scratched the charts a couple of times and continued to grow.
You had a hit with a cover of Poison Ivy, and just to do a 6 degrees of separation for you here, Gary, when you came to Australia doing that British rock symphony,
yes,
you played with a guy called Billy Thorpe, an Australian rock legend.
Yeah.
One of his earliest songs was a fantastic version of Poison Ivy, which he would have done in about 65. If he ever mentioned that to you, I don't know if he was a Paramounts fan.
Well, bless him, he was a lovely man. Of course, he's sadly missed now, isn't he?
Yes, he is.
Yeah, no, we got on very well with him. He was a very good guy, you know. But I can't remember discussing Poison Ivy with him. May have come up. That was in 2000, I think. It's a long time ago.
So anyway, so the Paramounts, at least you've got a record company and you're releasing singles, and also by the time of your third single that you actually delved into a little bit of songwriting yourself. You wrote a song with Robin Trower, It Won't Be Long.
In those days, usually groups went into these studios at Abbey Road, and the idea really was to record a single and a B-side. And after doing that once or twice, Ron Richards, the producer, he said, we recorded the A-side, can't remember what it was now. And then he said, what are you going to do for the B-side? Well, we've got this, we've got that. He said, well, why don't you write one? Don't know, never written one. I said, well, have a go. So 10 minutes later, we wrote a song. I mean, there was only about half an hour left of the recording session, so we wrote it and recorded it in half an hour. And we did that 2 or 3 times, myself and Robin Trower, but it wasn't the start, really, of a songwriting career. It was really to fill in that B-side, and also because you stood a chance of perhaps earning a little bit more money out of it if you'd written one of them.
Did you enjoy the process?
Went by so quickly, can hardly remember it. I mean, we did write about the second or third one we wrote, Robin and I, was called Don't You Like My Love, and I always thought, I like that one.
What was the story of the Paramounts? Because you guys disbanded in 1966.
We played all over Britain by then, and even started going abroad, playing in Scandinavia and Germany. We did television appearances very often. We were doing quite well, but it was kind of drying up a bit. I mean, you have to really keep on playing all the time. And in the end, we took a backing job with Sandy Shaw, who had just had a hit in Britain. Having done that, the manager of Sandy Shaw, who's a lady named Eve, we finished playing with Sandy, and she sort of took it easy for a while. Eve also managed another act called Chris Andrews, who had had hits as well, Yesterday Man, and we got offered that, and we didn't have much on, so we said yes. It was a German tour, but it was one step too far for Robin Trower. He was hard-pressed to back Sandy Shaw, but when it came to Chris Andrews, he said, I'm sorry, guys, I quit. Robin left, and we got somebody else to play guitar on that tour, and at the end of it, in whenever it was, probably autumn 1966, we said, right, that's it, let's pack it in. I decided I would become a songwriter instead. I retired.
Retired at the tender age of what, 21?
19.
No, 19.
Yeah.
Did you have any plans to be a songwriter? Did you know publishers? What was your next step?
No, I'd already teamed up with Keith Reid, who was lyricist. Even when the Paramounts were going, we'd got together and written 3 or 4 songs. We were writing more then when the Paramounts stopped and trying to get people to record them.
Any luck?
No, not at all.
Oh dear. So what was your plan B?
Well, plan B, well, if nobody wants to cover our songs, Gary, you'll have to come out of retirement and you'll have to sing them. So I said, all right. And so we found musicians, Keith and I did, that we felt we wanted to make this particular sound. Bass, drums, guitar, they kind of go without saying, but we want to have 2 keyboards. We want to have me on the piano singing and also a Hammond organ. We didn't want an organ with the Animals type sound or Manfred Mann type sound. We wanted a Hammond organ, which had a particular sound. So we just went about finding good people. We were only doing our own songs.
And so did you and Keith have to pay for the recordings?
We didn't. We just rehearsed and people came and people left, and eventually we got it all together. The music publisher also had a record production company. So really the publisher paid for us to get going, and then he went out and sold A White Shade of Pale to whoever wanted to buy it.
Why did he pick that particular tune, Gary, besides having a lot of foresight?
He thought it was a hit. We weren't traditional. That was one of the concepts. The thing was, he wanted to do something different. We thought we were doing something different. I did try from my connections, try and get, for instance, White Shade of Pale recognised. I think I made a demo, or the band as it stood made a demo. Even people like George Martin, bless him, he said, it's rather long, Gary, 4.5 minutes. I said, well, we've got to do 2 verses and a couple of choruses, otherwise might as well not get going, and that's how long it is. Anyway, they were all wrong.
You must have had an instinct that this song was a bit more special than others that you'd written?
Not especially, it was just one of our songs. Amongst, I don't know if we'd written 10, 12, it was just one of them. It's just that when we went into the studios properly for the first time, that was the one we took along there, and 1 or 2 others we tried as well. But A White Shade of Pale was, only a 4-track recording, so it was played and sung live, no overdubbing. The way the microphones worked, the sort of sound that it got, worked. You thought, wow, that sounds great. We actually changed our drummer with it. Well, sorry, that was not our real drummer that played on it. When we got our real drummer, we tried to re-record it just so that he was on it, and we couldn't get anything like the same sound. Although it was the same instruments and everything, same studio. But just something happens sometimes when you've got only 4 tracks.
It's a legendary song now because it's one of the 30th biggest singles ever, and it's a good way to start, Gary, when you can sell over 10 million records. So you would have had instant overnight success there.
From the point of view of notoriety and interest, absolutely. We were hardly ready.
Were you named Procol Harum yet? You must have been if it was on the record.
Yes, we decided on that. We found that name a month or 2 earlier.
Guy Stevens named you guys because it was one of his friend's cats or something.
Yeah, Guy Stevens was a great mentor of Procol Harum. Well, he was always with us. He'd been a friend for a long time. I met Keith Reid through Guy Stevens. He was always encouraging us. The concept of the lineup of the things he helped with, and we thought about it, 3 of us, really.
Gary, White Shade of Pale is going through the roof, so what happens? Do you get on a treadmill, or you realise this is great, I'm going to have a career in music, I don't have to worry? What were your thoughts?
You don't think like that when you're that kind of age. Money, especially in those days, took a long time to get through to you, if at all.
Yes.
People will always give you some money, say, look, can you give me 30 quid? You can get it off the publisher or somebody. It would be an advance on what you would earn or what you hopefully would earn at some later point. The same when you make records, you can get advances. White Shade of Pale was selling 100,000 a day in the UK, but that didn't mean that we got the money from sales of 100,000 in our pockets at the end of the week. Not even sure if we ever saw it. If it did, it filtered through over that year or the following year and the following year, filtered through slowly, and of course you can eat it up by the expenses that you incur in having your band, getting some equipment, buying some clothes, travelling around. So it's not an instant earner, and I never thought that it was, because don't forget, I've been around. I've been in the Paramounts professionally since 1963. It doesn't seem long, 3-4 years, but I thought I knew the ropes a bit, and I was always careful. I didn't think, hey, we're in here, I'll have a Rolls Royce. They sent a Rolls Royce round for me once to pick me up, take me to a studio, and we were making our first album, and I said, who's that for? They said, it's for you, take you to the studio. I said, I'm going on the bus. I don't want a Rolls Royce.
That's very down to earth there, Gary, very down to earth.
Down to earth or stupid. Oh no, because the swinging 60s had been. They were still hanging on, the swinging 60s, but what we were dealing with here was the serious 60s. This is the point where, particularly British bands, they changed their outlook and they started writing the sort of music that they wanted, and they started playing the way they wanted. This was the time of Procol Harum and Jimi Hendrix and Traffic. It wasn't the time of the Mersey Beats and the Hollies. It all gelled together all of a sudden. Fashion, art, music. Your LP cover was almost as important as what was on the vinyl.
And Gary, you have White Shade of Pale. Did you feel any pressure for the next record?
I think we started thinking about a follow-up quite soon, once we'd settled ourselves in. Shade of Pale was still at number 1 in Britain, and we had a personnel change, because a couple of the guys, when we went to the studio, they had slightly different styles, let's put it that way, on drums and guitar. So we had to start thinking, right, well, we've got better look for some other people. All I could think of was my old mates who were good players from the Paramounts, you see, which by then was Robin Trower and B.J. Wilson. So I suggested them to audition with the other 3 of us, and of course Keith Reid, and I can't remember if Guy Stevens was there by then. I think he'd disappeared at that particular time. But nobody else suggested anybody. One guitarist came along, and I can't remember what he was like, but Robin Trower and B.J. Wilson got up and had a go, and then we first jammed, and then we tried a couple of Procol Harum things, and they were fantastic, of course. It was a surprise that everybody else thought that they played Procol Harum stuff well. It was a general consensus that Trower and Wilson would now join.
How are you and Keith Reid? Is it the same process, or do you come up with the music and Keith comes up with the lyrics, or he comes up with lyrics, or it's different all the time?
I think there's always been a bit of divine intervention in that I will have been thinking about some melodic ideas and rhythmic things. In other words, 3/4 written songs, and then Keith will have written some sets of words, and I would read them and look at them, and I would sing them with things that I had thought of. And the two things always seem to fit together. It's rare that he wrote lyrics to something I said, look, this is the finished song, let's have some words. And it was also rare that he gave me a set of words and I wrote especially for that particular set. Writing for something especially, I remember the song Grand Hotel, which was off of I don't know what album.
Grand Hotel.
Well, it's off of Grand Hotel.
Yes, of course.
But I did look at that and I thought, special, and it's got an atmosphere and it's about this grand life. And I sort of thought, well, I'll write something special that reflects that.
And Grand Hotel, apparently it inspired Douglas Adams to write The Restaurant at the End of the Universe, one of his Hitchhiker's books.
Yeah, well, I heard about that, or he told me, or I found out. And, of course, it really fits in with that science fiction idea of this place at the end of the universe. That's what will be going on there. It appealed to him. He can hear the textures and everything in it. Well, he was a great man. I loved his stories. And he loved Procol Harum as well.
Gary, you released a lot of fine albums. Grand Hotel, that's one of my favourites. And you did a fantastic idea to record with the Symphony Orchestra, in particular the Edmonton Symphony Orchestra.
I mean, what happened with playing with the Edmonton Symphony Orchestra was that they'd invited us to come and play concerts with them. It was only a couple of weeks before we got there. We were in California playing some concerts and we were about to go up to Edmonton, and we suddenly thought, look, this is quite a unique opportunity, this. First time we'd played with a full symphony like that and the choir, and they all sound very willing, and thought perhaps we should try and record it. So we got in touch with the Wally Hyder and he got his truck up to Edmonton. So it wasn't the idea of thinking, let's make a record with the Symphony Orchestra. It was just really an end thought, hang on, here we go. This is an opportunity not to be missed. And in fact, I thought, we haven't really got a fast song, something up-tempo, a bit more rock. Actually, on the plane, I thought, Conquistador, Spanish flavour. And I started to think of an arrangement with the trumpet, which was a bit Mexican, really, but they all speak the same language. So it had the orchestral introduction to it. Then it goes into the song, I suppose, as it was in the studio version. Then it has the instrumental break in the middle again with the strings and the trumpets and everybody horse galloping away. And luckily, everybody liked it.
Did it feel great playing with the Symphony Orchestra? Had you done it before?
We had one attempt at it in 1969, also in Canada on the other coast, but it wasn't so serious. It was at the Stratford Shakespeare Festival in Ontario, where they did have an orchestra, not symphony-sized, but they had all the instruments in it, and they asked us to go and play there. So this was pre-Edmonton. I thought, what should we do? And then we ended up doing this long piece that we had called In Held 'Twas in I, which was 20 minutes long. So I spent a month orchestrating that, and they said that they could supply a choir as well, so I thought of how the choir could be in that and just expanded it. And of course we already had a Salty Dog, which had string orchestra on it anyway. That was about the length of this concert. Wasn't much more than that. The actors from the Shakespeare Company there did the choir parts, and we just had a really, really good time. People from the Edmonton Symphony Orchestra actually saw us playing at the Stratford Festival and wanted us to go up there and do it, which happened probably a year and a half later or something.
Procol Harum, by 1977, the Something Magic album, you called it quits. The band disbanded. What was the reasons? We were still selling out good-sized concert halls. Procol Harum was never a stadium band like you have these days. It never suited that kind of thing. You get a nice concert hall with 2,000 or 3,000. That's where we're at our best, because we got quite complicated songs that need the right kind of sound atmosphere. Anyway, we were doing fine. We got a bit tired. I think we made Something Magic, and we turned round. We had a little bit of a problem with the people that were helping us produce it in Miami. Can you swear on Australian radio? Yes, you can, as long as we give a warning beforehand.
We played all of our songs when we got to the studio in Miami, and we played all of our songs that we had for this new album, and we played them to these two producers. And they said, well, what do you want us to do, Gary? We said, well, we'd like you to produce it, please. And they said, Gary, you can take dog shit and you can cover it in chocolate. But when you bite into it, what do you got? Dog shit. I thought, oh. They obviously don't like our style. We didn't record half of the songs that we'd gone there with, pulled another one out of the bag, which had been really just an idea for a couple of years, which was in fact 20 minutes long. It was a spoken word with musical characterizations of goodies and baddies, of worms and trees. And lo and behold, we finished our New Miami album, and we've got a 20-minute long piece, not even sung, talked. And we kind of thought, listen, we did this in 1968. We seem to have gone full circle. Meanwhile, punks were putting everybody down that play more than 6 notes in one hand. Disco had taken over. It just seemed a good time for the end of a tour. We all said goodbye to each other.
I do like Wizard Man.
Yeah, well, that's what happens when you got the Eagles in the next door studio making Hotel California. You get a little bit of countrified now and again.
I want to get onto your solo stuff now. No more fear of flying. Firstly, did you have a fear of flying?
No. Some people took that rather literally. Certainly Storm that did the album cover, he took it very literally. Plane crashing, and I'm sitting there as calm as everybody, and everybody else is meeting their death. Keith Reid wrote the lyrics, and as with a lot of his words, you can take them many different ways. I thought that No More Fear of Flying would be no fear about doing something solo, not in the context of Procol Harum. That's the way I saw it, nothing to do with getting into an aeroplane.
The album opens up with a track called Savannah, and that was the single. Have you heard of a band called The Moon?
No.
Well, The Moon was this great 60s pop psych band from the USA. They released 2 really good albums. The main guy, he was the singer and the keyboardist, and he was also the composer. His name was Matthew Moore. Matthew Moore wrote your song Savannah.
Well, it's his song then.
Yes. So where did you find Savannah?
Yeah. George Martin suggested it. George Martin produced the album.
I wonder where he found it.
Anybody that's writing songs, they end up with a publisher, and the publishers push them around if they think they're what you call coverable. And this one ended up. You know, I had a lot of my own ideas for that album, but George was producing it, and of course, no good turning down everything he suggests. So it was a bit of a mixture in the end. That was how that came about anyway.
Matthew Moore is a great guy because I actually went over to the States and met up with him. He also had Barbara Streisand covering one of his songs, and he played with Joe Cocker on the Mad Dogs and Englishmen tour.
Well, I think probably he was with a good publishing company that works hard on getting his songs covered. Barbra Streisand heard one, you know, and liked it. I'm sure there was other examples. So his publisher did well. I mean, unfortunately, I don't think it was a hit. I don't think Matthew made out much money out of me doing Savannah.
So, Gary, you're doing the solo thing, and then Procol Harum, you get back together for The Prodigal Stranger.
It was an experimental thing in many ways. It was just the period of time, and we're talking about 1989. The American radio stations were coming over to England, and they were setting up in somewhere like Abbey Road or Bill Wyman's Sticky Fingers, 10 DJs, and they were getting as many rock personalities from Britain to come to these events, and they would interview them, and they'd play tracks. So it was going live out to their stations in Houston or New York or Los Angeles or wherever. So I went to a couple of these things. At the first one I went to, I realised that in the minds of these American DJs, Procol Harum was very much alive. It wasn't like nobody had heard of them. It would have been 12 years since we retired, you see, in 1977. I was very surprised, and they were talking about songs, not just your normal conquistadors or things like that. There was, you know, Simple Sister or this and that. They liked and remembered very fondly, and it was like talking to somebody as if you'd just got a new album out. And it wasn't just one guy like that. They were all like that. Thought came in my head, Procol Harum's not dead in the sense, I didn't think he was dead, but it is remembered, and it's remembered in very good ways, and still current. People are still playing these tracks on the radio, and they're still enjoying them. At the same time, the internet just started, and they have started to have these chat rooms on AOL. I don't really know what I'm talking about here, but somebody sent me a transcript of this chat room conversation, and it was just one bloke on there. And he was comparing notes with this woman he was speaking to, and they talked about this and they talked about that live online. And they got down to what sort of music they liked, and he said, well, actually, I like Procol Harum. And her reply was, Procol Harum? That's my favourite group. I never thought there was anybody else out there. So these two people thought they were the only people that still liked Procol Harum. And of course, as soon as they answered that, other people watching the chat said, hey, I like those guys too. Within a space of an hour, there was 95 I know it doesn't sound a lot, but bear in mind it's very early internet, and you've got to be sitting in front of your computer doing it. There was 95, and somebody sent me this transcript, and with the thought of the American DJs and Procol Harum, was even fondly missed. And these poor souls that thought they were the only people in the world that liked Procol Harum, they thought they were solitary figures. I felt duty-bound to go back to them in some way. And so I just asked Keith what he thought, and we decided, we started off, we were writing songs, and it worked well, so we said, let's start from that basis again. So we just started writing some new songs, and we got together in the studio and started working them up, and we worked with an American producer, and then I think Matthew Fisher, he got involved, then Robin Trout got involved, and suddenly we were making another album.
Good news, and good news for all those 95 people.
Oh, they were very happy, and there was more than them in the end.
Yes, of course. But in the meantime, poor old B.J. Wilson had died, so did you keep in touch with B.J., Gary?
Well, yes, of course. He had moved to Northwest America, up in Oregon, with his wife, probably in the 80s at some point. He'd been playing with Joe Cocker for many years as well.
There's our Matthew Moore connection.
On stage. BJ was with Joe Cocker. I don't know how happily it was going, but sadly, somewhere in 1989, I think he had too much of something else. He didn't die. They revived him up in the hospitals, but he was in a coma, and he was in a coma for a long time. I used to go and see him in the hospital because we wanted him to get better and to come and play on this new record. And I would take him these tracks where we'd used a drum machine to play the drum parts, and I'd take it to him and his coma, play it to him, hoping that he would hear it and that he would get so annoyed, because he always thought that Procol should go back together, you see. I thought he'd get so annoyed that he would, hearing this drum machine, that he would wake up and go, what's going on? Unfortunately, he didn't. It was, I think, medical sometimes goes a little bit too far. They saved somebody's life, but unfortunately they died while they were saving him, if you like, and that can damage people. Anyway, he was a great man that was sadly missed, and he died whilst we were making that album.
Gary, we're out of time.
You might be going to bed over there, but
yes, I will be.
Gary boy here has got to think, what are we going to play tonight and in what order? And we don't go out and play the same. We rehearse a lot of songs prior to going on a little tour like this. Now we're on our own, so we're doing a concert of two halves, and I've got to try and put them together in the next, I've got an hour to do it.
Do you stick any of your solo songs in there or not?
Yes, I am. Don't tell anybody, though. No, there's some great songs there. No, I slip one in now and again.
Gary, I just want to mention that you are Gary Brooker, MBE. That means the Queen's given you something. So should I have been calling you Sir Gary or something like that?
Oh, just my lord. For the time.
You don't have the right accent for it, though, I think.
Yes, from Hackney Hospital to Buckingham Palace. It's not far, it's only about 6 miles. Well,
those 6 miles, quite a long stretch. I'd say your mum would have said, you've done well, lad. And your dad.
Yeah, they would.
Yeah.
I mean, it was charitable efforts via music. I've always liked putting on and helping out with big shows that can raise money. And it was more to do with that, not because I'm old and grey or anything, and let's give him something before he picks the bucket.
What has Mick Jagger done? Because he's a Sir Mick, isn't he?
Well, actually, we were invested. We went to the investiture on the same day, Mick and I. He was late. He had on white trainers, and I think he felt incredibly embarrassed in these white trainers at the end. First we thought, I'm Mick Jagger, I'll be cool. But actually, everybody else had done their best, whether they were rock and roll people or whoever they were. I know Mick looked really uncomfortable in his white trainers. But what did he do to become a Sir?
Yes.
Well, he avoided paying UK tax. He made Bill Wyman and Charlie Watts sit in Paris studios for weeks waiting for him to turn up. What else has he done? And he can't dance as well as Michael Jackson.
That's definite too. But so, if it's Sir Mick, he doesn't play an instrument, and Keith Richards writes all the songs with Mick, and he plays an instrument, so why isn't there a Sir Keith Richards if there's a Sir Mick?
I couldn't agree with you more. I'm absolutely with you on that. I mean, there have been ambassadors, and I say they, the Rolling Stones, and particularly, of course, Keith and Mick. I think Charlie's as important as everybody, and he's been there since the start, but why not just have made the pair of them OBEs? Some way, recognise their contribution to British exports, but to make him Sir Mick, who doesn't even live in the country, and Keith, who does live in Britain. I mean, they wrote all the songs together. They've been on the stage together for 50 years. It does seem rather odd. I'd be really peed off if I was Keith Richards. I
Yeah.
wouldn't talk to Jagger again. Certainly wouldn't call him sir.
Well, you know what, Gary? The Queen, she's fickle, obviously.
Yeah.
She's got her favourites.
Yeah, well, it's political somewhere. Somebody, probably Tony Blair was behind it.
Any plans to come back to Australia, Gary?
Oh, well, I haven't heard anything on the horizon yet, but
We haven't invited you back, have we? That's our shame.
no, this is the thing. All it takes is an invitation and a bit of money, and
Yeah.
we'll be there. Well, I've got to play in Darwin next time, in the summer.
I think you're pushing it there. It's a bit hot then.
No, all right, I won't.
Well, actually, you know what? There's no such thing as summer in Darwin. It's either the rainy season or the dry season. It's just hot all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I don't think it's much on the rock and roll map, not for international stars.
Yeah.
Perth, Adelaide, Canberra, Brisbane, Sydney, Newcastle, that's about it. Our ex-bass player and organist, Procol Harum and Paramount, Chris Copping, he lives up there in Queensland, up near the Coral Sea. What's it called? The Great Barrier Reef Way.
Did he live in Melbourne for a while?
Yes, he did. He moved up there for the climate.
Well, look, we'd love to see you back here anyway. That's the short of it.
Thank you. Australian Brits, we're all brothers. Don't let us fall out over cricket stumps.
Anyway, look,
Thanks for the chat.
thank you.
Hello to all the people.
Once again, Gary, it's been a pleasure. Thanks very much.
Gary Brooker signing off. Bye.